I'm Dwayne Hubbard with the Registrar's office here. We're going to talk about FERPA today and a little bit about what FERPA is. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. It is a federal law that we have to comply with. It is also known as the Buckley Amendment and is enforced by the Department of Education. And it governs any disclosure of privacy of student information. So, and one thing that does start at the point of admission. So even before they start enrolling, taking classes and stuff, that privacy does apply there for them. Why do we have to comply with FERPA? Because it is the law. The big impact for the university is it does impact our ability to receive financial aid for students. So if we don't comply with it, it can impact that ability. But the most important thing is to protect the privacy and safety of our students. Students' rights versus parents' rights. As soon as a student is admitted to the university, regardless of their age, so even if you're working with dual enrollment or dual credit students, FERPA does still apply, so we cannot disclose information to the parents unless the students have given their consent, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Students do have the right to know about their records. Those records are, as I said, kept confidential except for some exceptions. So the students do have the right to inspect their educational records. One thing I should point out is I did say that these are FERPA rights. Sorry, I got to keep it up higher. Okay. FERPA rights are academic records maintained by the institution. That does include you. If you are teaching courses, advising students and stuff, that does include any records you maintain with that student. So any of that information, if you have emails or just handwritten notes or whatever, those do fall under that FERPA compliance as well. So if we do have academic records of students and stuff, we do have to be able to give them access to that information. And we cannot, if we get a request for information, we have to provide that. You cannot destroy information, so it reaches out to you for that information. Students, get through my notes here, sorry. Students do have the right to ask to have some of their records amended. Mainly where you would see this apply is if they wanted to do like a grade appeal or something like that. If they don't agree with the grade that their instructor assigned them, they do have a right to appeal that, and there's an appeal process there to have it. And it would not change their grade, but they could have an amendment added to the transcript or something like that. But that happens very rarely. Students do have the right also to make their information confidential, and there is a form on our website that they can fill out to do that. One thing to be clear of is that that does make that information confidential to everyone. So if a student does make their information confidential, that even means if they contact our office, call us or something like that, we cannot disclose anything to them. They have to come in person with an ID. So it's very. Just a second. It's messed up here. So you can see when you are in VanderWeb or even in Download Star, things like that, when you're looking at your class rosters, if you see a sign like this here on our screen where it says confidential, that indicates that student's information is confidential. So you just need to be aware of that and handle that discreetly. And if students do mark their information confidential and want to remove that, they just need to stop by our office and fill out another form to get that removed. Students do have the right to file a complaint if they feel that we disclose their information improperly. So then we have to do it within 180 days of doing that. So if they feel that their information has been disclosed in some way without their knowledge. So what are education records? That's any academic records that relate directly to the student and again, are maintained by the institution. So again, that does include if you're teaching courses or anything like that, or advising students, any of those types of records are going to fall under that. So that is information that could be subpoenaed or gathered for that. So what are not education records are sole possession notes, law enforcement records, alumni records, or peer-graded papers before they are turned into the instructor. So sole possession notes are just things that you're going to use to try to remember students in a class. So it may be a seating chart, and they have just separate notes trying to identify different students, things like that. Otherwise, if it's anything academically related to their courses and materials, anything like that, those would fall into that privacy. So some of the different types of information that need to be handled in a secure way are the students' transcripts, their grades, whether that's midterm grades or early warning grades or final grades, any type of grade, or assignment grades or exams, anything like that. The student's schedule and any of their class assignments, their exams, your class roster, and any registration forms or other documents containing information that can identify the student, whether that's their name or ID number or anything like that. So there is some information that can be released, and that is what's considered directory information, which we'll get into a little bit more here in just a second. Or information that the student has given, if the student's given consent to release that information to another person. Or if you need it. The other thing is, which we'll talk about here a little bit too, is if you have an educational need to know that information. So if you need to know the student's information, if you're advising them or teaching a class or anything like that, that's when you have a legitimate need to know that information. We also do have to do some reporting for accrediting agencies and our state Board of Education. So we can release information in that way. So here are some of the directory information that's out there that can be released. And again, this is can be, it doesn't mean you have to release that information. And we always urge people to err on the side of caution when releasing information. So again, student's name, their local address and phone number, their email address, class standing or majors, whether they're full or part-time, graduation information, things like that are on there. And one thing I would point out here is we do say the email address is director information. When you're communicating with students via email, please make sure to use their Vandal email account for any communications and stuff with them. Don't use Gmail or their Hotmail accounts or whatever. Try to always use their U of I email address. So, as I mentioned, students do have an option to request to have information released. So there is a consent form, again, that's on our website that they can fill out. Generally, you will see them doing this to release information for their parents, because otherwise their parents do not have access to any of their information. So a lot of times the parents need that information for paying bills and things like that. So there's a form that the students have to fill out and provide to our office, and we enter that information into our student information system, which is called FERPA. And this is just a copy of that form and banner. It's called SWACONS. I don't know if many of you will have access to that in banner, but if you do not, your department administrative assistants that you're working with should be able to help you determine if that student is given access to have their information shared. Because without that, if a parent calls you trying to find out grades or what assignments their son or daughter has done or not done, you cannot give that information out without that student's written consent. And parents will call. Some more than once. So parents' rights. So parents, again, they may get that consent if the students have filled out that consent form, or a few other times if it's compliance with a subpoena, or if the parents can provide a tax return, which I've never seen them provide a tax return, but if they did, they could. One thing that does impact students, some students, is underage drinking or drugs if the student's under 21. The Dean of Students does contact the parents regarding that to let them, make them aware of those situations. So what can you do if a parent or spouse calls? Again, you want to make sure that the student's information is not confidential, which we can see in Vandalin, but also you need to check to make sure that they've given consent to that other person before you can release any information. You can still talk to them in general information about the course or assignment, upcoming assignments, things like that, but you can't get into any specifics about that student and their grades or anything unless they've given consent to that person that's contacting you. So again, if you have concerns or questions or something doesn't seem right, just contact your supervisor or maybe your department administrator or the registrar's office. We can help you determine what information can be given out, or what you should or should not say to the parent in those situations. So again, who can access non-director information? So it's U of I employees with a legitimate educational interest. So if you need to access that information for your class and need to look up a student's information, you can do that. You may have access to look up more students than just those in your classes or something like that. Just because you have that access doesn't give you the right to look that information up. You can only be looking that information up for if it's needed. So just because you know somebody or know students and somebody comes to you and asks you to look up another student or something like that because they don't have that access, that's not a legitimate reason to do that. So, but if you have a student in your class or you're advising students or a potential student, things like that, or students are looking to switch majors, you can go and look the information up. But just because you have the access doesn't mean you can go in and just look up anybody. Again, some more here on accessing non-director information is we do have some, again, reporting and things like that we have to do for accrediting bodies and for our State Board of Education where we share some of that information on students. So what can you do to ensure that student rights are protected? Again, access only of the legitimate educational records that you need as you're teaching a class or going about your work. And do not leave confidential information in easy view of other students or other people in public areas. When emailing students, like if you're emailing a class or something, or a group of students, major or whatever, make sure to use the BCC line in email so that they can't see the other students' emails, stuff like that, especially if you're emailing multiple sections of the course or something like that. We need to keep that information confidential. And again, don't discuss private student information. If you're having a conversation with the student, make sure you have a little bit of privacy, not stand out in the food court or something like that with it. Another very important one, never store student information on your laptop or phone or any other devices like that, or thumb drive or things like that. That's where we see a lot of the FERPA violations, just somebody's computer or thumb drive or whatever gets stolen, and people have access to other students' information by doing that. So always make sure to save it on a shared drive or something like that. And again, when in doubt, do not give out students' information. If you have any questions or concerns about that, don't give that information out. Posting grades. Do not post grades in a public location. So don't take your class roster with all your grades on it and post it on your door to your office or at your front, or maybe somewhere in your classroom or something like that. So post. So you can post grades in a manner that only the instructor and student can identify. So if you want to post a class roster with grades, you cannot have the student's name on it. It has to have like a random identification number or something like that that only you and the student would know who that is. So, but generally, just don't post them where they can see them or email them out or anything like that. When you're using BB Learn for longer courses, again, the gradebook is a great tool to use within BB Learn because that does limit who has access to those grades, so only the students can see them. Don't use an Excel file or something like that that you post in BB Learn where everybody can see that information. Oops. Just throw all that. Even if a student is chosen to be confidential, they can't be confidential in class because they have to interact in the class and with the other students and stuff like that. So they can't be confidential from the other students in that class. If you're combining the sections of a class though, if you have multiple sections of a single course meeting together or something, then that's where we do need to control some of that information. Students can grade each other's work in the class because that is considered part of the class and part of the educational experience. So that does not fall under the FERPA of not to see other students' grades and stuff like that. Do not leave a box of exams outside your office door for students just to sort through to find their own paperwork and stuff. And do not just set it somewhere in a classroom, like on a table or on a chair for students to go through. You need to hand them out individually, because students can't go in and see other students' grades and stuff like that, because that is a FERPA violation. If you do want to have students, they can stop by a department office again. So you'll see in the department admin or something like that to pick up the courses and stuff, so their assignments. So a couple of true-false questions. Is it okay to verbally talk with student Sally about Johnny's grades? So again, here, oops, doesn't tell me. The answer is no, unless Sally has given Johnny consent, written consent, which it seems unlikely. You never know. So again, just err on the side of caution and say no. Faculty are allowed to post grades outside their door, names and grades, as long as not too many people walk by. Again, the answer is no. Here's a case study that we had. So Melanie is a senior in high school and is also taking classes at U of I. That she has taken a course at U of I and for high school and college credit. How does FERPA apply? As far as we're considered, FERPA applies because she is enrolled in a course here. Has been admitted to the university. So it's going to apply just like any other student taking any courses from us. So one more case study. After class, you overhear that several students are struggling in their math class, and the instructor has experienced some personal issues. Should you share this information? What can you share? And who do you share it with? If you hear something like this, you should probably reach out to the math department to let them know of the situation, that the students are struggling in a certain course, but you should not get into any details about any of the personal information that impacts the instructor or anything like that. And you want to make sure and just share it with the math department. You don't want to go over to biology or something like that and start talking to them about that. So, and that was everything I had. Are there questions? Yes.
How do you know a spouse or a parent has consent?
You would have to look within Banner to see that, within that sort of consequence. So again, if you do not have access, that's something where the department administrator can help you determine that, or you can contact our office, and we can tell you if that person has that access. Do that. Okay. No other questions?
Actually, I have one.
Go ahead.
What's the difference between a student who has that confidence thing label versus other students?
So if they mark their record as confidential, that just means you can't
So,
share any of their information.
okay, but we can't share any information for any student, right?
Right. But even if the student's marked confidential and they call you up, ask about their grades or assignment or anything like that, you can't share any information
Okay,
in that manner. They would need to come in and see you in person to do that.
gotcha.
So. Yeah.
And it has to be a written
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah, the consent needs to be in writing, but they're going to allow other people access and stuff to their information. Yeah.
example, if the parent or anyone wants, or applied if they written consent, it should go to the office of registrar.
If they want one, I'm sorry.
If they want to see the grades or if they want the consent, the written consent.
Yeah, the written consent form.
Yeah, we cannot accept the written consent, but it should go to the office of registrar.
Yeah, if the student brings one to you, you should tell them to send it, bring it down to our office. Then we can get that filed and stuff, so everybody has that access. So. Okay. So one thing I would just reiterate, just err on the side of caution with all that information. And do not store information on your computer, on your laptop, personally. C drive or something, or on a flash drive. Always make sure to keep it on one of the shared drives, or it's more secure. Yes?
Is there like a common entity that might request directory information that we're allowed to give it to? Like a,
They shouldn't be contacting you. If somebody does, I would refer that up to your department, or to us, to the registrar's office. Generally, I mean, if an accrediting body or somebody is asking for some information like that on students and stuff, they should be contacting our office. So if you get an outside entity asking you for information and stuff, I would just refer it down to us. I'll make a report on that. So, your department or your major professor or somebody like that may ask for some information to help with something like that, and that's okay to get it there probably. But if it's an outside entity, I would just say no. Something else? Thank you.